You mentioned to me the average tenure of a CFO is 1.8 years.
One of the questions is, why is the CFO the one that changes most? And why not the head of sales, the commercial lead, or even the CEO? The CFO role isn't just this incremental promotion, and the training they've had doesn't prepare them to make that shift.
Today's guest is Ken Hickey, CFO coach at Ken Hickey Advisory. With over 30 years in financial leadership, including 16 years at Microsoft, where he served as CFO of worldwide operations and the worldwide communications sector, he now coaches CFOs and senior leaders navigating complex, high-pressure environments.
They basically see themselves as the number two person to the CEO. They've got to be independent. They're working for the board and the organization, not the CEO. I think a lot of it is from within. They're holding themselves back from actually really taking it on.
What needs to happen to somebody internally for them to realize they're no longer serving, but they're now a leader?
The training we have, all this knowledge is around developing skills around rigor, analysis, measurement. That actually is not what's required at the CFO level. There's a range of executive presence capabilities that they need to have. So these are the components.
Welcome to another episode of The Real Issue, where we talk about leadership and how a lot of business problems are actually people problems. Today, I have with me Ken Hickey. Ken has spent over 30 years in financial leadership, including 16 years at Microsoft, where he served as CFO of worldwide operations and CFO of the worldwide communications sector. Before Microsoft, he held senior finance roles at Hertz, GE, and AIG across tech, travel, and financial services. He's lectured business strategy at the University College at Dublin. He holds an MBA from Warwick Business School and Master's in Science and Business and Executive Coaching from University College Dublin, Smurfit, if I'm right. And today he runs his own executive coaching and CFO mentoring practice, helping finance leaders navigate the gap between the technical role they train for and the leadership role the business actually needs them to play. So I'm very excited to have you on the podcast, Ken. I know we've been talking a lot leading up to this. I'm really excited about the topics that we're covering. I think you have a lot of insights into the role, into the CFL role, which we'll get to is very critical and sees a lot of change in organizations. But before we dive into it, can you just tell me a little bit more about yourself and maybe your practice? We'll take it from there.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for having me, Netysha. This is great. It's lovely to be here and talking with you. Yeah, no, as you say, I was very fortunate. I had just over 30 years of a great career in some market-leading companies, which I was privileged to be part of. Learned a ton: Microsoft, Hertz, General Electric, AIG, and I guess throughout all of those experiences, there was a couple of things that really drew me and things I really enjoyed, but part of it was about people development and really bringing out potential in people and in organizations and in teams. I had for a number of years, I think, planned for a second part, a career part two, which was not part of a gigantic global organization, but was something just focused more around myself. Yeah, so moving into a coaching business was the natural kind of evolution for me. I wanted to bring all of those years of corporate experience and professional development I received and combine that with formal training and coaching and really kind of seek to help kind of leaders navigate some of the most demanding moments of their careers by being able to, and particularly CFOs, by being able to talk with them about not just I can understand the technical and the commercial side of the role. I can understand the leadership challenge and the leadership pressure and the ambiguity, and those challenges and the personal pressure that sometimes the role requires. And then I can also bring the personal development coaching, the reflection, self-awareness piece. So bringing these things together for people, I think, creates a value for them.
Yeah, sure.
And we're able to have conversations at kind of multiple levels we can move from.
Yeah.
The functional to the personal leadership. And so that's the work I'm doing, and that's been going on for a couple of years now. So I'm loving that and learning myself every day. I get involved in it.
Yeah, I mean, I know you and I have had a lot of discussions about what makes the CFO role unique. You focus your entire executive coaching practice on that. I've had CFOs come through my practice, even though I work generally with all types of executive leaders. And I think both of us have recognized that the CFO role is sometimes a revolving door. It's often replaced when I talk to friends who are in executive search. They're always saying that it's the role they're always looking to fill. And I know you mentioned to me something like the average tenure of a CFO is 1.8 years. I mean, for somebody who's really been entrenched in the industry and who's had the CFO role yourself, can you tell me more about what's unique about the CFO role? Why is it so susceptible to change? And how has it evolved over the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that statistic I heard was in the private equity context from
Okay.
somebody, a recruiter specialized in CFO recruitment for private equity. And I mean, they are, as you said, they're constantly looking. 1.8 years, he said, was the average. And the private equity environment is really challenging. And it was interesting. One of the, questions is why is the CFO the one that's changes most? And why not the head of sales, the commercial lead, or even the CEO? And so I think that kind of points to a pivotal role that the CEO plays there between board, exco, and the executive team and the CEO. And we can kind of come back to that maybe, but essentially, these pressures because the role's been evolving, and I think that's one of the things that's happened over the last I don't know if it's the last decade or the last 15 years, but there is over let's say the last decade anyway, I think there's an acceptance that the role has evolved significantly away from being, a reporting role, a measurement role, and into something much more strategic, much more focused around value creation for the business. And I mean, it makes sense because the CFO, like some other executives, like maybe the chief people officer or HR lead for the business, occupies this central position where they get to see across the entire business, to get to see everything across all the initiatives and all the departments and all the projects and all the activities, and they get to see these in terms of value creation, in terms of cost, in terms of where capital's invested. And so that puts them in a really strong position to be able to evaluate these things and to help inform how strategy should evolve and how the mission and the goals of the organization should evolve. And so this kind of broad organizational knowledge, and connection across the organization I think now is placing the CFO as a kind of partner to the CEO in value creation and looking across the business. And so businesses, CFOs who are ready to occupy that spot, it's a great time for them. And CFOs who are put into that role and are struggling to meet those expectations, they are hitting some of those challenges, and we're seeing, as you say, in private equity, that revolving door for sure.
And I think specific to the CFO role, we've talked before about the training that's required to get them to that place, both in terms of their education and licensing, and in their professional training. And then suddenly it's not exactly the same skill sets that allows them to be successful leaders. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you've seen that and put a little more context into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, no, I mean, the training we have is we all go through, most of us, like at least go through pretty significant technical training, years and years of college degree and professional qualifications after that. Many of us then graduate study, but all of this technical training and certification and knowledge around accounting standards and rules and financial processes and even our, not how we arm ourselves, equip ourselves with knowledge around technology. These, all this knowledge is around developing skills around rigor, analysis, certainty, measurement. And that actually is not what's required at the CFO level. We're dealing with ambiguity and uncertainty, and we're dealing with relationships. And so there's a real gap here between the technical training that we've been prepared for. And this training, is what creates a great controller or a great finance manager, the person who can be relied upon, who understands the process, who has their hands on the data, who is super precise and can give you clear answers, who's a real expert. Well, that's actually not what you need for the CFO role. And so the CFO role isn't just this incremental promotion. It's more like a kind of fundamentally different kind of orientation around how you view the business and your role in it. And the training they've had doesn't prepare them to make that shift.
Yeah.
So there's a gap,
Yeah.
and somebody's going to fill the gap. I guess that's part of what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Did anyone prior to your CFO roles, did you already get a sense that when you were moving in that direction that a new skill set was gonna be required, or did anyone clue you in that, things are gonna change as you move up, or was it just, trial by fire?
Well, I mean, it was a little bit of trial by fire, I think. I remember myself preparing, working, presenting something to like one of the most senior people in Microsoft at the time. And so I was delighted to have this opportunity. We were spending a couple of hours on something. And I, after the meeting anyway, I got feedback that they turned around to somebody else and said, that guy confuses me, which was not the outcome I was looking for. And I really thought about that, because, I was trying to bring so much to the conversation in terms of the information I knew, the perspective, my grasp of the situation, my interpretation of the situation, how I was able to see. And I kind of lost sight of that, how to translate that to a kind of more strategic executive level, where it's not really about being the expert. It's not really about demonstrating your capability. It's really about communicating something. And, as they used to say, be brief, be bright, and be gone
I hadn't heard that
was
one
a
before.
kind of rule of thumb. Yeah. And that's what happens to us at the kind of mid-level finance roles or even senior level. I've often at senior level, we're showcasing ourselves and we're trying to demonstrate what we know. But actually, at that CFO level, executive presence is much more about really telling the narrative, the story, and really being able to tell that in a way that the audience understands it and somebody else, and seeing it from somebody else's perspective. So yeah, so I had my lessons.
Was there, any particular project or particular relationship in your career that really brought that lesson home that was really, a turning point for you in learning? And if you don't have a story, that's fine too. But, like, when did these lessons really start to solidify, or when did you realize you had to do something different or do something new?
Yeah, I think I mean, being privileged in Microsoft to see some really amazing leaders in action,
Yeah.
and just by observation and being able to see how, the positions they're able to take, the clarity that they're able to bring to a complex topic, and how they can reduce something that has a lot of elements to it into something that's really its essence, and in a way that is relatable, and also to be able to separate the kind of the signal from the noise, to be able to really go to the thing that has meaning, relates to the future. Just watching that and just being a sponge to that, like, every day, I think that's it, and it was more osmosis over many years of that than any one event.
And, for CFOs who aren't as lucky as you to have such great mentorship and leadership by example, what's the cost to them if they don't get it right? If what got them there that saying, what got you here won't get you there. What if they never learn that lesson? What if they just double down on, you know, being the technical leader they were previously and never take on these more, I don't know what the right word. It's not soft skills, but I guess executive leadership skills. What if they never take those on? What's the potential risk there?
Yeah, I think so for well, there's a risk. I'll think about the business risk first because wherever there's going to be a business risk, that's going to just reflect back on them in terms of their career. So I guess somebody who is not able to step from the kind of operational mindset up into a more strategic mindset. There's some massive transformation opportunities going on right now. AI and digital transformation is one of them. So that opportunity may slip by. And that's an opportunity for the CFO to take a leadership role on something. We can kind of come back and unpack that in more detail. Also, as organizations are growing, what I'm seeing frequently is organizations are growing in complexity, and then as the organization grows, the role and the demands of the role are changing for CFOs. It may be a business which is going into new funding levels, new private equity ownership, new investor, maybe going towards IPO, and the new investors coming in are expect to have a certain type of interaction with the CFO, and they're expecting the CFO to occupy a certain role. And if you're not ready to step up into that, that's where I mean, that has really significant impacts for the business if you don't play the role properly, but the role that's expected. And I think about that in terms of executive presence, and we can unpack that maybe a bit more as well. But so there's opportunities that are happening right now, just in the landscape from technology, and then there's also you're not able to grow with the business. You're hitting a ceiling, and the business. If you're not able to grow with the business, then what happens then is the business will need to switch you out. Now the business has to onboard somebody else. It's really costly. It's not always nobody's sure if that's going to be a great fit. It would have been so much better if the CFO and the business had kind of had a development plan for the CFO to grow with the business as a business is thinking about, what's our ambition here? Oh, well, we want to exit in 5 years. We want to float this company in 5 years. We want to restructure or do something else. Okay, let's think about the capability of our executive team to get us on that journey. What do we need to invest in to make sure we're all growing, so that we're ready for those moments when we have more institutional focus or external focus.
Yeah. And, what kind of leaders think like that? Like, when yeah, I just find it interesting that there are enough leaders out there who have the foresight to think about, when they're executing on a business strategy to also take into account, like, are our leaders ready for this change? And do you find that that's often the case? Do you find that that's something heralded by the CEO or the board or the investors, or, who tends to champion that kind of support for leadership?
Yeah, well, I guess I get connections from HR people leaders in the business for sure, who see capability gaps or opportunities that they want. And so there are people out there absolutely, and some CEOs as well who are proactively thinking about their team and projecting this team forward 5 years to this moment of whether it's investment or float or exit or whatever it is. And they're thinking, okay, no, we need to make some changes. The team needs to build some capability. So there's definitely people, but most often that's not the case. What's happening most often is that the CFOs are starting to bump against some of their own limitations, and the relationship with the CEO is not working as well as it did. New investors are coming in, and they're requiring a level of rigor, or there's a pressure being applied to the CFO that they're not comfortable, they're not sure how to deal with. There's new expectations of them from new board members for them to play a different role that they're wondering,
Mm.
how do I play this role? So they're identifying these things themselves. And then they might come to me directly and say, look, I need help with this, and then they get sponsorship for it, and that, but they sell the story themselves. But yeah, I would say more often, half the time they're identifying themselves, half the time other executives. And, it's these shifts that they have to make are typically, it follows very similar pattern. Typically, they need to move from working through control to working through influence. That's one of the shifts. They have to go from, managing data uncertainty and facts to ambiguity and uncertainty, and working through that. They've got to go from managing processes to managing relationships, from being very internally focused within the organization to really mapping their organization externally and thinking about how their organization internal capabilities, where the opportunity connects with external opportunities. They think in terms of month end, quarter end, year end. So these kind of fixed time periods, and they're going to shift their focus to kind of much more, maybe longer term, but kind of more like value creation horizons where, it's not about quarter end. It's actually how do we, when will we launch this product, when we get into market, when we actually start realizing the benefit. That's not determined by quarter end or a month end. It's a different period. So there's all these shifts that they have to make, and none of their training prepares them for this. And it's very hard for them to really step outside themselves and see this, because they don't have, many of these organizations are smaller, small, medium-sized organizations, or even large organizations that don't, maybe they're not showcasing, I guess, the example said in Microsoft, that they may have to see other people in action. They don't have it. So how would they know? So they need some help.
Yeah, you said so many great things there in terms of the move from, more operational to strategic. So I just kind of want to like dive into a few of them. So one of them, you said, moving into more, focusing more on relationships. And I imagine in the case like with a CFO by an a PE-owned company, they have to wear very different hats when they think about their stakeholders. So I imagine interacting with your CEO requires a very different skill than interacting with your board, very different interaction. If they're separate people, the investors, like what are the different, skills that you teach in terms of how to communicate with different stakeholders?
Yeah, I think that, we talk about executive presence. I think whether they're dealing with the board or they're dealing with the CEO or external regulators
Yeah.
or external, lenders or something like that, there's a range of kind of executive presence capabilities that they need to have. Gravitas and composure, for example, confidence and a sense of personal authority, clarity in communication, decisiveness, at moments of uncertainty or with uncertainty, consistency, emotional self-regulation. So these kind of are the components of these are the fundamentals for any of those relationships. They're common across them all. And more specific, if we were to speak specifically about the different, I mean, again, a lot of PE organizations are expecting the CFO to be this counterweight, counterbalance to the CEO, respectfully, but certainly a counterweight. And if the CFO doesn't have the confidence and sense of personal authority to challenge the CEO, well, then they're not going to play that role. And the board expects the CFO to tell them what's actually happening, right? So that they're expecting, certainly they'll want a narrative around how the business is creating value and the opportunity. They'll want to be able to rely on what they're saying there. I mean, they want to be able to bank on that perspective. And so the CFO then has to play this role as a kind of intermediary between the board and the CEO. They've got to be independent. They've actually have to have an independent mindset. They're working for the board and the organization, not the CEO. They partner with the CEO, but it's a very delicate balance. They take their day-to-day instruction from the CEO, and yet they have to be independent from them. And so if they're not able to manage the delicacy of that type of independence plus business partnering with the CEO, plus executive level communication with the board and bring all that together, well, they'll lose either the board or they lose the CEO's trust or both. And that's a big part of that revolving door, I think, in the
Yeah.
PE situation where PE comes in and the CFOs hasn't had to deal with that type, I would say, that structure before. And so they basically see themselves as the number two person to the CEO, or they're or one of the exec co serving rather than leading. And they don't realize they gotta step up into a different type of position.
Yeah, that sounds like a really big unlock for somebody. I don't know, maybe we could talk a little bit more about that. Like, what needs to happen to somebody internally for them to realize they're no longer serving, but they're now a leader? Like, are people born that way? Is it something you could talk somebody through? Or I don't know, when have you seen that unlock happen in their head?
Yeah. I mean, I think absolutely, it's not about being born in any way. I think it's just learning, and it really is. It's it's just understanding the expectations. And all these people who are in these roles are all super smart and capable and high achieving anyway. So they just need to be pointed in the right direction. That's and it may be something. If somebody learns it for themselves, I would say they're learning it because of a difficult
Yeah.
experience, you know,
Uh,
and it's the second time that they're doing it correctly themselves. So that's one way of doing it, is to learn it the hard way
uh-huh,
by screwing it up the first time, and then you figure it out, or maybe you figure it out the second time or the third time. Or, so I think that the thing is most people aren't actually there's no formal way they're getting this. It's almost, through trial and error, as we said, more error
uh-huh.
than success,
Yeah.
in many cases. Or people who are, you know, proactive in their own personal development to keep themselves abreast of what's going on in the market, what's happening. Peer having been involved in forums that bring peers together, that they get to talk about these things, and that's fantastic, and they get to learn from their peers and being connected into what's topical for the profession, and what's happening, and what conversations are happening. If you spend even on, something like LinkedIn, if you spend time on LinkedIn, all these conversations are all happening on LinkedIn right now.
Yeah.
So that it's all out there and people are telling, it's all freely available. It's about just being informed about the expectations. And if you're not informed, you're probably walking into unknowingly walking into a kind of a challenging situation.
I mean, I feel like what's unfair for the CFO role, compared to others is fine, there's learning on the job for everyone, but I just feel like there's such an asymmetric risk for the CFO role because, the stakes are so much higher and there are real dollar amounts or legal ramifications tied to messing up. Would you say that that's true, and maybe that's what contributes to that 1.8-year statistic? Yeah.
If we have a situation where an organization has grown, really successful, the team's super excited about it, and suddenly now they're stepping into taking on some institutional investors and bigger lenders, and there's bigger credit lines, and they've stepped up into a new growth phase. And now the external focus on the business is much greater. If the CFO hasn't brought their own level of executive presence and capability up, well, what happens is that, you know, often the board, looks it uses its interactions with the CFO and the CEO as ways to understand what's actually happening in the business. So there's a lack of confidence, or there's of uncertainty around decision making, that's a signal. So that basically they become human signals around what's happening to the business. Yeah. And because the CFO and the CEO will have a lot of interaction with the board, maybe more than many of the other executives, because there'll be board reporting will always involve the financial pack and the audit committee and things like that. And lenders will always want to sit down with and understand. So you become a human signal to what's happening in the business.
I like that human
And
signal. Yeah.
yeah, it's a significant thing. And in a crisis situation, if a business hits a crisis, if it hits like a triggers a covenant issue, or if it's about to hit a cash flow issue, and you need to go out to the board or to externals, explain this issue and explain how you're going to get around this issue and the path beyond it and the support you need from them. If you don't have the real composure to deal with the questions and the challenges, or you don't have the real clarity of what that narrative is, or you don't have the confidence to really back this point and to be able to articulate why you're making certain decisions, even though not all the information is clear, you know, that they're gonna lose confidence because they're gonna challenge this, and the person who's not prepared is gonna be in hesitant, is explaining themselves, and as you say, if you once you're explaining yourself, you're losing, and uncertain. It's just, again, it's about the signals. So in terms of a crisis or a moment like that, it's so important. And those things will gonna happen. Every business is gonna face cash flow issues. It's gonna face some product launch issue that's gonna happen. It's gonna be something, some bump along the road that you're going to need to get those investors and stakeholders on board. And so you become the embodiment of their kind of view of like into the business, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, when you frame it that way, I could see like how it's all the more important to be able to, exude that confidence and you talked about emotional regulation, all these things. That's why they come to fore because I guess they're sort of looking to you to see what the state of affairs is. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
Another thing you mentioned in terms of like the transition from operational to strategic is, gaining comfort with ambiguity. And, can you tell me a little bit more about what that means for the CFO and how does, a role that is so rooted in numbers and facts, how does one, manage ambiguity in a way that's like obviously also professional and, shows their stewardship?
Yeah. So I guess the numbers and the facts that we have usually about the business are usually retrospective. It's numbers and facts that we've gathered from the past and we're now reporting them. So I think that's the first thing. We're going to separate the data, the numbers, the facts as historic.
Yeah.
This is historic information, recent historic information, perhaps, but historic information. So hindsight. So that has to be accurate. That has to be precise. And and absolutely, there's and of course, there's a tremendous value in having that, and that's a really important role to be able to do that. And that's the kind of more that controller role, making sure. And the CFO's role, though, is looking ahead.
I see.
So immediately now we're not talking about facts or data or anything. Now we're talking about assumptions. We're talking about plans. We're talking about what scenarios. And so, that's that switch from the known
Yeah.
to the kind of unknown. And the thing here is around how the CFO creates a mechanism that allows them to have a process for arriving to how much information do I need for me to make the decision here? And it may not always be the same. Maybe decisions which are irreversible decisions, which carry massive consequences for the business. And so the level of if 100% of the information I need is, would be nirvana. Okay, I want to get to 80, 90% here and clear on the risk and everything. And then there's other decisions where, okay, it's a 70%, I need directionally and because we can course correct and we can change tack easily. So I think it's a decision-making framework which takes into context the irreversibility of the decision and the consequence of the decision and that interaction of those two things.
And then the final thing that I want to dive into in terms of that move again into the more strategic role of the CFO is you were mentioning how part of that means, if you get that right, it's if you have a CFO who could do that well, they're also better able to take on, external technological changes and be more innovative. And, we've talked specifically about AI. You started mentioning it earlier in the call. Can you tell me how that works in terms of, a more strategic CFO and how they're better able to take on innovation and change?
Yeah, I'm particularly excited about AI for finance and the finance role here. And it's not finance reporting numbers or anything. This is the opportunity for finance to be kind of the beachhead, maybe for the organization in developing a digital transformation strategy or deploying AI. And this is kind of come from my own experience in Microsoft where we do this really well. Um, the biggest problem to leveraging AI right now or deploying a kind of digital transformation strategy is around data. The data is fragmented. It's everywhere. It's all over the place. Hundreds of different systems can't get their arms around it. It's inconsistent and it's inaccurate or it's inconsistent or it's unreliable. So not only is it everywhere in like 100 different systems, it's also in different formats, different structures. It might be right, it might not be right. Yeah, we don't know. The third piece is that no one's kind of governing it. No one's in charge of it. There's nobody manages it coming in or manages it through its life cycle and manages it going out. And that so and without the data, there is no AI. We need that. I think it's a big opportunity for finance to be the beachhead for organizations and how they deploy AI and how they think about their digital transformation strategy. And the reason for that is the three biggest blockers for leveraging AI in a business are all connected to data. And it's the fact that data is really fragmented and in silos all over the business. Hundreds of systems, everywhere. So it's super fragmented. It's very unreliable. It's kept in different formats. It's different structures, different conventions. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. It's you just can't rely on it. And thirdly, no one is managing the life cycle of the data as it comes in, how we get our arms around it, how we manage it, and then where it goes. So except actually in the finance organization, this is one of the places where we've been working on this for countless years because we've been bringing all of our financial systems together into kind of what we call one version of the truth. And so we've actually reduced the fragmentation significantly in finance. We have a couple of systems. Some companies maybe have one and some have a couple. And in terms of data reliability and health and accuracy, well, actually, we put an awful lot of work around making sure financial data is accurate and right. We audit it every year. We get external audits. So this is an area where we actually know that that data is correct and is accurate and is in consistent formats, etc. And we also have data governance around, not anybody can just put financial information into the financial systems. It's certain permissions and certain people. So finance actually is a great place to start with actually leveraging AI capabilities for the business because we've actually we're further ahead on those three kind of data challenges. And actually the other reason is finance organizations and companies, they've already been through many, many different major transformations, centralization of all finance functions, or outsourcing, or creating shared services, or developing massive ERP systems. Nearly all financial professionals have all been part of these kind of transformation initiatives. So they understand transformation looks like. They understand we're going from something what we have today, something completely different in 18 months. So I think it's a great opportunity for finance to be kind of that place where you start. And that's what many businesses need is just where do we start? For how can we see this in action? How can we kind of understand what it means? So that's the start. But then there's a number of reasons why CFOs and actually all C-suite kind of executives today really struggle with AI. Um, and I can go into those a
Yeah,
little
I'd
bit
like
if
to
I
hear it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the first thing is The first thing is this idea of they thinking about it is like a category error. They're thinking about this like an IT initiative, like a kind of
Yeah.
technical,
That's
a
what you would
technology.
think, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
that it's an IT
yeah,
initiative. Yeah.
yeah. And it's absolutely not a technology IT initiative at all. It's a business model conversation about how we and value chain conversation about how we do things in a way that creates more business value. That's what it is. And so if we think about this as a technology initiative and we pass it to our IT team, our technology team to implement, not the right direction. That actually we missed the opportunity, and we've now turned into an infrastructure initiative instead of a business model opportunity. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is a simple fact, a simple feature, nobody's fault. Many of the CFOs or C-suite executives are of an age that they just didn't grow up using AI. And so the last 15 years for them, they've been 20 years, they've been working with different tool sets. They've had different mechanisms to solve problems and to get work done. They've worked at different speeds to get to answers and get to data. So they just have an unfamiliarity with it. That's just an experience, a lived experience gap. And then, so it's important for them to kind of bridge that by personal use and getting personally invested in that. I think another reason, another challenge is that there's a kind of a mismatch between how businesses, the planning cycles of businesses, and the actual development cycles of AI capability. So at one level, we sit down, we have our annual plan, and we sit down, we create a strategy, and we set our annual plan. And that might be, we might have a 3-year strategy or a 5-year strategy, and we've got these annual planning mechanisms. And we're thinking as a team, we're sitting here and we're saying, okay, how do we use AI? Well, okay, let's understand what's going on in the industry. Let's think about how it fits into our 3-year plan. And before we know it, though, we're trying to fit something which is change. It's the capability is rapidly changing. And every 6 months, every year, every 6 months, the capability is like doubling. And we're trying to fit that into a planning cycle, which is looking at what's happening we're doing for 3 years. So by the time we actually get to think about how we actually fit this in, the whole landscape has shifted. The whole AI capability landscape has shifted, and we're like, "Oh, hang on, we're talking about something that's completely changed, and we have to catch ourselves back up again." So we're just trying to fit it into our planning cycle, and that's just not the way to approach it. It needs more rapid decision making or some different mechanism so that you can leverage it. Um, Another thing is that there's a lot of kind of noise, I think, vendor noise out there where every vendor now is like an AI company. Everyone's an AI. Everything's an AI in the cloud, AI version. Everything's got AI tagged on somewhere. And we know that a lot of that is just are claims that aren't real. I mean, these companies are trying to build it,
No,
but they understand that they cannot go to market anymore
no.
without saying that they're an AI business or they have AI capabilities. And they're in the midst of trying to figure it out for themselves
Mm.
and figure out how to build AI capabilities that the market needs. There's a big gap here between the claims and the capability that they actually have. And our C-suite executives, we don't have the AI insight and deep knowledge to be able to separate or filter between the capability and the claim. We don't have the knowledge and the insight to sit down with the vendor and say, really ask the right questions that can really expose and separate capability from claim. And that then creates a lot of uncertainty where executives are like, I just don't know what I'm buying here.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure if they have it or they don't have it. And so I can't make the decision.
Yeah, I mean, are there even, do those questions exist that would help you distinguish between, the two? Or is it, where we are in terms of the development of this technology that, everybody's really just trying to take an educated guess and calculated risk? Or are there leaders who actually able to differentiate between the two?
I think there's leaders who are actually informing themselves more deeply in terms of what's real, what's not real, what they're really looking for, and I think through their own kind of through them developing their own insight and knowledge and use of AI, it's easier for them to ask the right questions. They know what the right questions are in the normal terms of they know how to kind of talk about the claim around a particular AI capability and get the to really dig into is this an actual feature that exists, or is this a planned feature? Is this something that's under development, and how this actually works? So I don't know if there's a set of questions people, cheat sheet of questions. It's probably context specific, but certainly there's a lot of noise, like everything's AI. So, and I think we saw in the early, a few years, over the last few years, you've seen a lot of kind of, I think, disillusionment with the actual value being generated out of AI investments, because people ended up kind of deploying this as a solution looking for a problem, and that was the wrong approach. Or they didn't really think about it in terms of fundamentally their business model evolving. It was like an IT project. That wasn't the right approach. Or they actually partnered with companies that didn't have the capabilities, and were only yeah, they now realize that they're only developing those capabilities, and the and the customer is now part of the development test bed, and that wasn't the right approach. So, anyway, I think there's some things like, there's an opportunity for a CFO here to, as I say, use finance as a starting place and to become a kind of an internal knowledge, an internal leader around how to think about AI in a real business model value creating way, and then help the rest of the executive team think about how then that we deploy it across broader parts of the business.
I mean, we're talking about AI specifically, but, if I'm to look back at our entire conversation, one of the themes that's coming out for me about, this more strategic CFO is sort of, the courage of their convictions and really being like fully integrated with that. And I don't know, confidence doesn't really fully paint that picture, but it's, having the confidence to be the human signal to their different stakeholders, or be the agent of change, or be the one to make the call for how they see an organization moving forward. And to your points earlier, like, these are all, like, non-technical skills, like, there's a lot here that has to come from, I don't know, within. Do you find that you do a lot of, like, inner work with some of your CFOs, or
Yeah, I do. I think a lot of it is from within. I think a lot of it is the role they're appointing themselves to.
Oh, I
What
like that, yeah.
yeah, what are they appointing themselves into? And what authority, what personal authority do they bestow upon themselves? And because it's one of those things. Why? Sometimes you see somebody who's got tremendous ability to bring people with them, to lead, to kind of influence, and they have that confidence, and they have that, as you say, conviction. What is it, that are they born with that, or is that something that they've just imbued themselves with the authority to take these things on?
No.
Uh, while others are more cautious, and so yeah, a lot of the work I do is trying to sometimes identify if those gaps, if those blockers exist. Are there personal limiting beliefs that are holding people back from filling that role and playing that part? Because often the role is a role that everybody else wants them to play. Everybody else wants them to play that part, but they're holding themselves back from actually really, really taking it on. And so, yeah, we talk, and that's when it moves away, and the work moves away from anything technical, commercial,
Yeah.
into pure, the limiting belief that we carry with us for
Yeah.
all of our lives. Yeah.
Yeah, tell me about it. No, oftentimes where I'm brought in for coaching is when, mostly women, when they move from, a senior leadership role into an executive role. And, this theme comes up time and again about there's a certain point where I really love this word used, where they appoint themselves, where they say, like, it's not me trying to prove something every time. Like, I'm bringing into this role like my full self, and like I can, just loose now, and like all my skills, experience, and judgment lead me versus feeling I have to prove myself to anyone. Yeah.
Exactly. I belong here. But gosh, so much of our past, our has shapes us into occupying other roles and it's hard to undo 35 years of shaping
Yes.
that you should be in this role. You should be this. You should be this. You're this shape in this place, and you should be happy. That's a good place. And you get 35 years or 40 years of shaping towards that, and then suddenly you're in a job, and people are like, "Oh, can you be something else?" Well, it's not really. I mean, it's going to take time for that to
Yeah.
change, and it's going to be difficult.
Well, good. I think this is a good place to end our discussion. I thought that was really well, and yeah, it kind of went full circle in terms of what this means for a CFO to change, or what the transformation to a more strategic CFO looks like. But thank you. Thanks, Ken, for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.